boy, ChatGPT was going to unlock the world for this girl, and I was not going to have to be worried in the same way.
When it comes to learning.
Well, now there's study mode. Could you talk a little about that?
So study mode is a product we just launched, and it is intended to really improve learning in ChatGPT and take it from an experience that is just focused on giving answers to really guiding a student to get to the answers. So in study mode, ChatGPT answers Socratically. It personalizes responses to sort of the level of your learning. It understands the context of what you're learning. It asks great follow-up questions. It asks if you want to have a quiz on the topic. It encourages you to go deeper. And ultimately, this is a first step to really leaning into this idea of ChatGPT as a tutor.
So how did this come about? Was there conversations with educators and parents about this?
So study mode actually came out of a trip that our team took in India.
Oh, wow.
Where they realized a few things. One, they realized that in a place like India, families were spending a huge percentage of their per capita income on tutors and after school help. They also realized that there was just a tremendous will and desire among young people to get to the next level. And so, we began this journey of what would it take to actually get ChatGPT and turn ChatGPT into an even better tutor than it already is. And so we started by, and this was my first experience building an AI product. So we started actually building a schema informed by learning science and informed by pedagogical experts that said, how should ChatGPT respond? If it's not just going to give answers, but it's going to actually help you learn. And then we worked with experts around the world to gather what we call golden examples of how ChatGPT would ideally respond. Is the tone encouraging? Does it encourage curiosity? Does it cater a response to the level of a student's need? And through that process of sort of going back and forth and training the model, that's how study mode emerged. And I would say, we're super excited to see the feedback on this product out in the world, but it's also very much a beginning.
Yeah, it's a starting point.
It's a starting point. We're really only in the early stages of pushing the way in which the model can respond in multimodal ways. One day you could imagine asking study mode to give you samples of a sort of a biology assignment to explain organic chemistry and to pop up interactive diagrams, or to nudge you, 3 weeks down the road. Do you remember you told me that you wanted to ace this year's organic chemistry exam? Shall we dig back into the topic now? It could be proactive and really sort of travel with you over time. And I think over time, the hope is to get study mode to that point.
That'd be great. Yeah, I could see that combined with spaced repetition, and you could have just a really good tool that doesn't just help you pass the test, but help you remember it for a long time. Absolutely. And I think you touched about something there, which is that in certain households, they can afford to have private tutors. Tutoring programs, great. And we talk about kind of the differences in educational opportunities. You can have a bunch of kids that go to the same school, but the parents that are able to have the kid go to a tutor are going to be in a situation where their child's going to have a higher chance of an outcome. Now you see this as a leveler.
Look, I think the first place where AI is having a huge impact in education is not even in the classroom. It's outside of the classroom where it's equalizing access to what's really adult support. There are many students out in the world who don't have access to a quality teacher. They don't have access to tutors. They don't have access to parents who are going to sit down and help them. And now with AI, they can have this companion who can encourage them, who can give feedback on their homework, on their writing, who can help them answer tough questions. We formed a lab of student users of ChatGPT. It's called ChatGPT Lab. I think you're going to talk to a few of the students. And one thing that really struck me is they said using AI gave them confidence. And it got to them in a place where formerly they would feel stuck or they would feel discouraged. One of the students told the story of being in the classroom as a computer science student. And for many years, she would get stuck in her computer science courses, and she started to give up. She couldn't understand the textbooks. But when she used ChatGPT out of school as a tutor, she started to feel like, oh, I can ask questions. I can understand this. I have confidence, and maybe I can actually continue and move forward. And so I think it's as much, if you think about what tutors do in the world, they give you encouragement. They give you a sense of confidence that I can and I want and I can move forward. And then, of course, they deliver the content in contextual and personal ways. I think ChatGPT can do all of these things.
So when it comes to workforce productivity, how does that work on a personal scale? What advice would you give to people?
So all the recent data shows that workers who use AI in the workforce are incredibly more productive. It's particularly true in fields like professional services and financial students, but really any graduate who leaves institution today needs to know how to use AI in their daily life. And that will come in both when they're applying for jobs as well as when they start their new job. And so one of the big reasons why institutions are now deploying AI as core infrastructure across campus is they want to make sure their students leave with those workforce skills. The data shows that 7 in 10 employers would rather hire someone with AI skills over someone who had up to 10 years of experience in a given function.
I've seen that. I run a firm where I help put together teams to work with companies that are trying to deploy AI. And the thing that we look for in people we work with is basically AI skills. Somebody spends 6 months learning how to use this stuff. I don't really care what their LinkedIn or actually their curriculum looked like. I just want to know, have you been using it? Can you use it?
Yeah. Look, I think the other sort of core literacy that's going to become important now is coding. For a while it was, there was a moment where we thought all students need to learn coding. And then I think there was a big focus on engineers. But now with vibe coding, and now that there are all sorts of tools that make coding easier, I think we're going to get to a place where every student should not only learn how to use AI generally, but they should learn to use AI to create, to create image, to create applications, to write code. And I think sort of basic coding is going to become a core literacy that's going to be important as well.
Yeah, I hear people go like, why learn to code? Because AI codes for you. And it's like, why learn to read if books are full of text? I was like, no, the world still runs on these things. And I think, it's a very valuable. One of my colleagues, he does a lot of financial stuff and he's creating new calculators and building little tools for this all the time. I build stuff for myself for learning and whatever. And, I already knew how to code, but it just makes it so much easier. And knowing what the code does is effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm of the view that as coding becomes something that's easier, the ability to understand code, to create it and to bug it is going to become a core literacy that's going to become increasingly more important.
I think that's great advice. I think just the more time people spend trying to use these tools, trying different things with these tools. And one of the things I've heard that works really well is just meeting on a regular basis with other people, whether it's at a workplace, like have once a week or once a month to get together and talk about stuff, or students sharing what they've learned. So there's been some sort of sensational headlines talking about how AI can cause brain rot when it comes to education.
Look, I hear you, and it's one of these questions I get asked every day. AI is ultimately a tool, and what matters most in the education space is how that tool is used. Learning takes struggle. It takes working with information. It takes processing it. If students use AI as an answer machine, they're not going to learn. And so I think that's what people are worried about. And so part of our journey here is really to help students and educators use AI in ways that will expand critical thinking, that will expand creativity. And you don't need to read complex studies to know that AI used in certain ways is positive or negative. I think of my daughter, right? She's learning long division right now. It takes a certain amount of struggle. There's some tears involved. If I were to hand her a calculator and said, don't do the division problem, just put it into AI, you're going to learn long division, she wouldn't. But at the same time, down the road as she's learning advanced math, I anticipate I can give her that calculator and she'll be able to do math at a higher level than she otherwise would. AI use is no different. It needs to be used in a way that drives feedback, that gives people personal tutoring, that helps you ask and answer questions in different ways. That's how we're going to advance learning.
Yeah, I read, there was one study that just recently made the news, and I actually sat down and I read it, and it was saying if you copy paste answers, you don't learn, which was just like, wow.
It's like if I were training for a marathon and you said like, hey, Leah, can I give you a scooter? Yeah. And for some of these training runs, you'd like take a scooter down the road. I wouldn't get into more shape. That was very similar to that study. Yeah, and I think the frustrating thing is I think there really are important questions to be asked about this. I do think that, critical thinking skills, we have to think about how we develop these and how we pursue that. I get a little frustrated that when I see, I'm sure there's a real good defense of that study, but I see studies like you're saying an obvious thing. The thing we need to think about is how do you actually use these tools? How can you improve your critical thinking skills? And I think that's going to be, an open-end question we're going to have to keep asking ourselves.